The sun beat down on the bustling marketplace of Zazura. Merchants called out prices for pyramids of dates, mounds of spices, and bolts of vibrant silk. The air hummed with the chatter of bartering and the laughter of children. But for Salma, the marketplace was a battleground, not a playground. 16 years old and thin as a reed, she navigated the crowded stalls with the agility of a desert fox. Her eyes, sharp and watchful, scanned for opportunities, for moments of distraction. Her younger siblings, two small shadows clinging to her ragged skirt, whimpered with hunger. Salma knew she had to find food, and quickly. She spotted a baker's stall piled high with golden loaves. The baker, a large man with flour dusting his apron, turned to serve a wealthy merchant. This was her chance. With a swift movement, Salma slipped a loaf under her shawl, her heart pounding against her ribs. She melted back into the crowd, her small hand clutching the bread tightly. It wasn't much, but it was enough to quiet the rumbling in her siblings' bellies for a little while. Life had been hard since their parents succumbed to the famine. Salma had become both mother and provider, her nimble fingers and quick wit their only defense against starvation. Far from the clamor of the market, Sheikh Ashraf paced the cool marble floors of his palace. The weight of his responsibilities pressed heavily upon him. He was a just ruler, but he felt a growing disconnect from the people he governed. He yearned to understand their struggles, their joys, their fears. He longed to see his city not through the eyes of his advisors, but through the eyes of his people. He made a decision. He would walk among them, disguised, and learn their true needs. He donned simple robes concealing his royal insignia and slipped out of the palace through a hidden passage. He stepped into the vibrant chaos of the marketplace, a world away from the gilded cage of his palace, ready to see his city anew. Salma, clutching the stolen loaf, hurried towards the alley where her siblings waited. Relief washed over her as she pictured their faces brightening at the sight of food. But her relief was short-lived. A rough hand clamped down on her shoulder, spinning her around. It was Masood, the market overseer, a cruel man with a face like a hawk. "Thief!" he bellowed, his voice booming across the marketplace. The crowd parted, curious eyes turning towards Salma. The bread tumbled from her shawl, landing in the dust. Masood grabbed her arm, twisting it behind her back. Salma cried out in pain. "Please," she begged, "I only took a loaf of bread." "My siblings are hungry," Masood sneered. "Let this be a lesson to all you beggars," he declared to the onlookers. "Theft will not be tolerated." He raised his heavy hand and brought it down hard across Salma's back. She gasped, tears stinging her eyes. He struck her again and again, each blow sending waves of pain through her small body. The crowd murmured, some looking away in disgust, others muttering about the harshness of the punishment. Salma's cries weakened, her vision blurring. A hush fell over the marketplace. A man in simple robes, his face hidden by a deep hood, stepped forward. He stood between Masood and the crumpled form of Salma. "Enough," he commanded, his voice calm yet firm. Masood, startled, lowered his hand. "This girl is under my protection," the stranger declared. He gently lifted Salma into his arms, her small body light as a feather. The crowd gasped. The stranger turned and strode towards a magnificent black stallion tethered nearby. He swung himself onto the horse, settling Salma in front of him. He looked down at her bruised face, his eyes filled with compassion. Then, with a flick of the reins, he rode away, leaving Masood and the stunned crowd in his dust. As they rode, Salma clung to the stranger's robes, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and bewilderment. Where was he taking her? Who was this man who had saved her from Masood's wrath? The imposing gates of the palace loomed ahead, and Salma's fear intensified. She had only ever seen the palace from afar, a symbol of a world she could never belong to. Now she was being carried through its gates into the unknown. The palace was a labyrinth of shaded courtyards, marble fountains, and hidden corridors. Salma, still sore and trembling, clung to the stranger's robes as he carried her through the grand halls. Sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting colourful patterns on the polished floors. Servants bowed low as they passed, their faces a mixture of curiosity and awe. Salma had never imagined such opulence. The smells of exotic spices and fragrant flowers filled the air, a stark contrast to the dusty streets of the marketplace. He carried her into a brightly lit room, furnished with soft cushions and silken drapes. He gently lowered her onto a plush divan. "You are safe here," he said, his voice kind. He removed his hood, revealing a strong, handsome face with warm brown eyes. Salma recognized him then. It was Sheikh Ashraf, the ruler of Zazura. Her heart sank. She had stolen from his city, and now she was in his palace. She expected punishment, imprisonment, perhaps even worse. Ashraf saw the fear in her eyes. "Do not be afraid," he reassured her. "I will not harm you." He clapped his hands, and a servant appeared, carrying a tray laden with food. Dates, figs, and warm bread, more food than Salma had seen in weeks. He gestured for her to eat. Salma hesitated, her stomach growling with hunger, but her fear overpowering her appetite. Ashraf sat beside her, his presence both comforting and intimidating. "You must eat," he insisted gently. "You are weak and injured." He spoke to her of her siblings, asking their names and ages. Salma answered cautiously, her eyes darting around the room, still wary of her surroundings. Ashraf listened, patiently, his gaze steady and reassuring. He told her he had witnessed Masood's cruelty and he could not stand by and watch such injustice. He explained that he had been walking the market in disguise, seeking to understand the lives of his people. He had seen her desperation, her hunger. He understood why she had stolen the bread. A physician arrived, examining Salma's bruises and tending to her wounds. Ashraf remained by her side, his concern evident. Slowly, Salma began to relax, the warmth of the room and the fullness of her stomach easing her fear. She began to see Ashraf not as a ruler, but as a man who had shown her kindness and compassion. But the questions remained. Why had he brought her here? What did he intend to do with her? The palace, despite its beauty, still felt like a gilded cage. Ashraf sat beside Salma, watching her quietly as she finished the last of the dates. He asked her about her siblings, their names, their ages. Salma, still hesitant, told him about young Omar, barely 5 years old, and little Yasmin, just 3. She explained how their parents had perished during the famine, leaving her to care for them alone. She told him about the hunger, the constant struggle to find enough food to keep them alive. Tears welled in her eyes as she spoke, the memories of their hardships still fresh and painful. Ashraf listened intently, his heart aching for the young girl and her burdens. He had known of the famine, of course, but hearing Salma's story, seeing the pain in her eyes, brought the reality of it home to him in a way that reports and statistics never could. He asked about their life in the market, where they slept, how they managed to survive. Salma spoke of the kindness of some merchants, who occasionally offered scraps of food or a warm corner to huddle in during the cold nights. She also spoke of the cruelty of others, like Masood, who seemed to delight in punishing the poor and vulnerable. As she spoke, Salma found herself warming to Ashraf's gentle questioning. He didn't judge her, didn't accuse her. He listened, truly listened, to her story. She saw in his eyes a genuine concern, a compassion that she had rarely encountered. She began to feel a flicker of hope, a tiny spark of trust in this powerful man who had rescued her from the streets. Ashraf, in turn, was captivated by Salma's resilience, her quick wit, and the fierce love she had for her siblings. He admired her courage and resourcefulness in the face of such adversity. He shared stories of his own childhood, of the lessons his father had taught him about justice and compassion. He spoke of his desire to create a city where no child would go hungry, where everyone would have the opportunity to thrive. Over the next few days, Salma and Ashraf shared meals together in the quiet of her room. They spoke of their dreams, their fears, their hopes for the future. Salma learned about Ashraf's responsibilities as Sheikh, the challenges he faced in governing his city. Ashraf learned about Salma's dreams of a life beyond the market, a life where she could provide for her siblings without resorting to theft. With each shared meal, each stolen glance, a connection began to form between them, a bond forged in shared vulnerability and mutual respect. The palace, which had initially seemed so intimidating, began to feel a little less like a prison and a little more like a sanctuary. Yet Salma couldn't shake the nagging worry for her siblings, left alone in the city. And Ashraf, despite his growing fondness for Salma, couldn't ignore the whispers of his advisors, questioning his judgment in bringing a thief into the royal quarters. Ashraf found himself increasingly drawn to Salma's spirit. He enjoyed their conversations, her sharp observations about life in the market, her quick wit, and her unwavering devotion to her siblings. He saw a brightness in her, a potential that shone even through the grime and hardship of her young life. He began to spend more time with her, sharing stories, discussing the challenges of his role as Sheikh. He admired her resilience, her ability to find hope, even in the darkest of circumstances. But not everyone shared Ashraf's admiration for the young market girl. His advisors, men accustomed to the formalities and rigid traditions of the palace, grumbled about the presence of a thief within the royal walls. "Your kindness is misplaced, Your Highness," one advisor cautioned. "She is a common criminal. She will surely betray your trust." Another advisor warned of the damage to Ashraf's reputation. "What will the people think, Your Highness, when they see you harboring a thief in your palace?" Their whispers followed Ashraf through the corridors, sowing seeds of doubt in his mind. Was he being foolish? Was he letting his compassion cloud his judgment? One afternoon, while Salma was arranging flowers in a vase, a gift from Ashraf, she overheard two advisors speaking in hushed tones just outside her room. "He's blinded by her charm," one said. "A street urchin." "Playing on his sympathies." The other advisor replied, "Mark my words, she'll steal him blind given half a chance." Salma froze, her heart sinking. She knew the advisors didn't trust her. She knew they saw her as nothing more than a common thief. Their words confirmed her deepest fears. She didn't belong here. She was a stain on the pristine marble floors of the palace. Later that day, Ashraf joined Salma in the palace gardens. He had been reviewing reports from the market, and he was troubled by what he had read. He described the rising food prices, the increasing number of people struggling to afford even the most basic necessities. He asked Salma about her experiences in the market, about how people were coping with the rising costs. Salma, despite the sting of the advisor's words still fresh in her mind, answered thoughtfully. She described the desperation she had witnessed, the families forced to choose between food and shelter. She spoke of the clever ways people bartered and traded to make ends meet. She also spoke of the corruption she had witnessed, the merchants who hoarded goods to drive up prices, the officials who turned a blind eye in exchange for bribes. Her observations were sharp and insightful, revealing a keen understanding of the market's intricate workings. Ashraf listened intently, impressed by Salma's intelligence and resourcefulness. He realized that her experiences, her understanding of the market, were invaluable. He had been looking at the city through the lens of reports and statistics, but Salma offered him a different perspective, a glimpse into the lives of the people he governed. He began to see her not as a thief, but as a valuable asset, someone who could help him understand the true needs of his city. He saw strength in her, a resilience that inspired him. Despite the doubts sown by his advisors, Ashraf's connection with Salma deepened. He found himself looking forward to their conversations, valuing her insights and admiring her unwavering spirit. Masood, seething with resentment, paced his small office above the marketplace. The humiliation of being challenged by Sheikh Ashraf, of having his authority undermined in front of the entire market, burned within him. He clenched his fists, imagining the Sheikh's downfall. And that little thief, Salma, she would pay for her defiance. He would see to it personally. He summoned 2 of his most trusted guards, burly men with faces as hard as stone. "That girl, Salma," he snarled, "she's not alone. She's part of a larger gang of thieves, operating right under our noses." The guards exchanged glances. They knew Masood's tendency to exaggerate, to blame the poor for any missing goods, but they also knew it was best not to question him. "I want her found," Masood continued, his voice dripping with venom. "And I want her brought to me. Alive! We'll make an example of her." Masood had a plan, a way to not only rid himself of Salma, but also to discredit Ashraf. He would accuse Salma of conspiring against the Sheikh, of plotting to steal from the palace treasury. He would paint her as a dangerous criminal, a threat to the very stability of Zerzura. And with Salma out of the way, he could continue his own illicit activities, skimming profits from the market, lining his pockets with bribes from unscrupulous merchants. He began to spread rumors, whispering to influential merchants and palace officials, hinting at Salma's supposed treachery. He described a vast network of thieves operating within the city walls, led by the cunning young girl he had so publicly punished. He emphasized the danger she posed to the Sheikh, suggesting that she was a master manipulator, using her innocence to gain Ashraf's trust. He planted seeds of suspicion, watching them take root and grow. He even approached some of Ashraf's advisors, men he knew were already wary of Salma's presence in the palace. He fed their doubts, exaggerating her crimes, hinting at a conspiracy that threatened to undermine Ashraf's authority. He knew that these whispers would eventually reach the Sheikh's ears, poisoning his mind against the girl. Masood knew that his accusations were baseless, fabricated from thin air, but he also knew the power of fear, the power of suggestion. He knew that in a climate of suspicion, even the most outlandish claims could be taken as truth. And he was confident that his plan would work. He would see Salma punished and Ashraf discredited, all in one fell swoop. His revenge would be swift and complete. He smiled, a cruel, predatory glint in his eyes. Ashraf paced the cool marble floors of his private chamber, his mind a whirlwind of conflicting thoughts. He couldn't deny the growing affection he felt for Salma. Her intelligence, her resilience, her unwavering devotion to her siblings had touched him deeply. He admired her spirit, her ability to find hope even in the darkest of circumstances. He valued her insights into the lives of his people, insights he could never have gained from within the palace walls. But the whispers of his advisors, like a persistent desert wind, eroded his confidence. They warned him of the dangers of trusting a thief, of the damage to his reputation. They reminded him of his duty to his people, his responsibility to uphold the law. Masood's accusations, though outlandish, added fuel to their fire. Could there be any truth to his claims? Could Salma truly be part of a larger conspiracy? He tried to dismiss these doubts, reminding himself of the fear in Salma's eyes, the desperation he had witnessed in the marketplace. He had seen her hunger, her vulnerability. He had seen the genuine love she had for her siblings. Could such a heart be capable of treachery? He sought solace in the palace gardens, seeking the tranquility of the fragrant blossoms and the soothing murmur of the fountains. But even there, the whispers followed him, carried on the breeze. He felt trapped between his duty and his heart, torn between what he knew to be right and what he felt to be true. Meanwhile, in her room overlooking the gardens, Salma felt a different kind of confinement. The palace, once a refuge from Masood's cruelty, now felt like a gilded cage. She longed for the freedom of the marketplace, the familiar chaos of the bustling stalls. But more than that, she worried about her siblings. They were alone, vulnerable, without her protection. What were they eating? Where were they sleeping? Were they safe? She paced her room, her anxiety growing with each passing hour. She had traded one form of imprisonment for another. She had escaped Masood's wrath only to find herself trapped in a world of whispers and suspicion. She knew the advisors didn't trust her. She had overheard their cruel words, their disdain for her humble origins. She felt like a prisoner, watched, judged, and misunderstood. She longed to see Omar and Yasmin, to hold them close, to reassure them that she was safe. She yearned to return to the familiar streets of the market, to the life she knew, even with its hardships. The palace, with all its luxury, offered her no comfort. It was a world she didn't understand, a world where she didn't belong. She felt a growing sense of desperation, a need to escape, to find her way back to the people she loved. The palace walls, once a symbol of safety, now felt like an insurmountable barrier, separating her from the world she knew and the family she cherished. She knew she had to find a way out, a way to return to her siblings, a way to reclaim her freedom. The moon hung like a silver coin in the inky sky, casting long shadows across the palace gardens. Salma stood at her window, gazing out at the sleeping city. The palace, usually bustling with activity, was now quiet and still. Even the fountains seemed to murmur in hushed tones. It was the perfect time. Fear gnawed at her stomach, but the worry for Omar and Yasmin was stronger. She had to see them, had to make sure they were safe. She had managed to save a few pieces of fruit and some bread from her meals, tucking them away in a small cloth bag. It wasn't much, but it was something. She glanced around the room, her heart pounding in her chest. She had studied the palace layout carefully over the past few days, noting the patterns of the guards, the placement of the torches, the quietest corridors. She had found a small, unlit passageway behind the kitchens, a service entrance rarely used at night. It was a risky plan, but it was her only chance. Taking a deep breath, Salma slipped out of her room, the cloth bag clutched tightly in her hand. She moved silently through the darkened corridors, her bare feet padding softly on the marble floors. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine and night-blooming flowers. She passed closed doors, behind which she imagined the palace's inhabitants sleeping soundly, oblivious to her daring escape. She reached the kitchens, her heart pounding in her chest. The large room was dark and empty, the ovens cold and silent. She slipped through the back door into the narrow passageway. The air here was cool and damp, and the silence was broken only by the scuttling of unseen creatures. The passageway led to a small, unlatched gate at the back of the palace grounds. Salma slipped through the gate, closing it gently behind her. She found herself in a narrow alleyway, shadowed by the high palace walls. She was free. She hurried through the dark streets, her senses heightened, her every shadow seeming to conceal a threat. She knew the city well, its hidden pathways and secret shortcuts. She moved quickly, her small frame blending into the darkness. The marketplace, usually bustling with activity, was now deserted, the stalls shuttered and silent. She reached the alley where she had left Omar and Yasmin, her heart filled with a mixture of hope and fear. She called their names softly, her voice barely a whisper. Two small figures emerged from the shadows, their faces pale and drawn in the moonlight. "Salma!" they cried, rushing towards her. Salma knelt down, embracing them tightly, tears of relief streaming down her face. She pulled the cloth bag from beneath her shawl, offering them the fruit and bread. They ate hungrily, their small hands clutching the food as if it might disappear. Salma watched them, her heart aching with love and worry. She knew this brief reunion couldn't last. She had to find a way to keep them safe, a way to provide for them without resorting to theft. But for now, she held them close, savoring the moment, the feeling of their small bodies against hers, the knowledge that, for tonight at least, they were together again. Salma watched Omar and Yasmin devour the stolen food, their small faces, illuminated by the flickering moonlight. A wave of relief washed over her, followed by a surge of protectiveness. She couldn't bear the thought of leaving them again, of returning to the gilded cage of the palace. She had to find a way to keep them safe, a way to provide for them without resorting to theft. As she pondered their future, a flicker of movement in the shadows caught her eye. A familiar figure emerged from the darkness, his silhouette unmistakable. Against the moonlit sky, it was Masood. Salma's heart sank. He had followed her. Panic seized her. She quickly ushered Omar and Yasmin deeper into the alley, hiding them behind a stack of empty crates. She peeked out cautiously, watching as Masood approached the entrance of the alley, his eyes scanning the shadows. He stopped, seemingly unsure of her whereabouts. He muttered something under his breath, then turned and walked away, disappearing around the corner. Salma breathed a sigh of relief, but she knew she couldn't stay there. Masood would likely return, and she couldn't risk being caught with her siblings. She decided to follow him, to see where he was going, to try and understand why he had been tracking her. Keeping to the shadows, Salma trailed Masood at a safe distance. He walked with a purpose, his steps quick and determined. He led her through a labyrinth of narrow alleyways and deserted streets, finally stopping at a small, unassuming building near the edge of the marketplace. Salma recognized it as the back entrance to a warehouse, a place where merchants stored their goods. Masood knocked on the door, a specific sequence of raps, and after a moment the door creaked open. He slipped inside, the door closing quickly behind him. Salma crept closer, pressing herself against the wall beside the door, straining to hear what was being said inside. She heard the murmur of voices, then Masood's voice, louder and clearer than the others. "The Sheikh's little pet has flown the coop," he said, a sneer in his voice. "She's back with her siblings, hiding somewhere in the market." Another voice, deeper and gruffer, replied, "So our plan worked. She's distracted, worried about her family. Now we can proceed." Salma's ears perked up. What plan? What were they talking about? She listened intently, her heart pounding in her chest. Masood chuckled. "The price of bread will double by next week," he said. "And the week after, it will double again. The people will be desperate. They'll be begging for scraps." The other voice laughed. "And they'll pay whatever we ask. We'll control the supply, control the prices. We'll be richer than the Sheikh himself." Salma gasped, realizing the full extent of Masood's cruelty. He wasn't just a cruel overseer. He was a profiteer, deliberately manipulating food prices, starving the poor for his own personal gain. A wave of anger washed over her, a fierce determination to expose his treachery. She had to tell Ashraf, had to show him the truth about the man he had entrusted with the market's oversight. She waited until the voices inside quieted, then slipped away from the warehouse, her mind racing. She had to find proof, something concrete to show Ashraf. She knew Masood kept records of his transactions, a ledger detailing his illicit dealings. She had seen it once, when she had been cleaning his office after one of his brutal punishments. If she could get her hands on that ledger, she could expose him for the greedy, heartless man he was. It was a dangerous plan, but she knew she had to try. She had to find a way to stop Masood, to protect her siblings, and to help the people of Zerzura who were suffering under his cruel schemes. Salma knew Masood's office was above the marketplace, accessible through a rickety staircase at the back of the building. She had cleaned it once, after one of Masood's brutal punishments, her small hands scrubbing the bloodstains from the floor. She remembered the layout, the heavy wooden desk, the locked cabinet where he kept his records. She waited until the marketplace was deserted, the moon her only guide. The silence of the empty stalls was unnerving, each creak and groan amplifying her fear. She crept towards the back of the building, her heart pounding in her chest. The staircase groaned under her weight as she ascended, each step echoing in the stillness. She reached the landing, a small, dimly lit space with a single door leading to Masood's office. The door was locked, but Salma had anticipated this. She had noticed a loose brick near the bottom of the doorframe during her previous cleaning. She carefully removed the brick, revealing a small, hidden key. It was a risk, but she had no other choice. She inserted the key into the lock, turning it slowly, silently. The lock clicked open, and she pushed the door inward, slipping into the darkness. The room smelled of stale tobacco and sweat, the familiar stench of Masood's presence. Moonlight streamed through a small window, illuminating the heavy wooden desk in the center of the room. Salma remembered the ledger, a thick, leather-bound book, usually kept locked in the cabinet behind the desk. She moved quickly, her hands trembling as she tried the cabinet door. It was locked. Panic began to rise in her throat. She had come this far, risked so much, and now she was thwarted by a simple lock. She searched the desk drawers, her fingers fumbling in the darkness. She found nothing. Just as she was about to give up, her hand brushed against a small metal object at the back of one of the drawers. It was a key. Her heart leaped with hope. She grabbed the key and rushed to the cabinet, inserting it into the lock. It turned, the lock clicking open. Inside, she found the ledger, exactly where she remembered it. She grabbed the heavy, a book, clutching it to her chest. She had it, the proof she needed to expose Masood's treachery. She turned to leave, but as she did, she heard a sound from the hallway, the creak of the staircase. Masood was returning. Fear surged through her. She had to get out now. She darted to the window, pushing it open. It overlooked a narrow alleyway. It was a long drop, but she had no other choice. She took a deep breath and jumped, landing heavily on the cobblestones below. The impact jarred her, but she scrambled to her feet, ignoring the pain in her ankle. She clutched the ledger tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. She had escaped with the evidence she needed to bring Masood down. She ran through the dark streets, the precious ledger clutched tightly in her hand, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and triumph. The palace gates loomed before Salma, imposing and impenetrable in the pre-dawn light. She knew the risks. Masood would be searching for her, furious at the theft of his ledger. The guards would be on high alert. Capture meant certain punishment, perhaps even death, but the thought of her siblings, of the countless others suffering under Masood's cruelty, spurred her onward. She had to reach Ashraf. She had to show him the truth. She found a small, unguarded service entrance, the same one she had used for her escape. She slipped inside, her heart pounding against her ribs. The palace was still quiet, the servants yet to begin their morning routines. She moved quickly, her bare feet silent on the marble floors, the heavy ledger clutched tightly in her hand. She knew her way to Ashraf's private chamber, having memorized the route during her time in the palace. She reached his door, hesitated for a moment, then knocked softly. Silence. She knocked again, a little louder this time. The door opened a crack, revealing a sleepy guard. "Who is it?" he grumbled. "It's Salma," she whispered urgently. "I must speak with the Sheikh. It's a matter of great importance." The guard recognized her. He opened the door wider, his eyes widening in surprise. "You! But how did you—" "There's no time to explain," Salma interrupted. "Please, take me to the Sheikh." The guard, still bewildered, led her through the chamber's outer rooms. Ashraf was seated at his desk reviewing documents, a frown creasing his brow. He looked up as Salma entered, his expression shifting from surprise to concern. "Salma, what is the meaning of this? How did you get back into the palace?" Salma wasted no time. She stepped forward, placing the ledger on his desk. "You must see this," she said, her voice trembling with urgency. "Masood, he's been lying to you. He's been stealing from the people, starving them for his own profit." Ashraf looked at the ledger, then at Salma, his brow furrowed. In confusion. "Explain yourself," he commanded, his voice sharp. Salma recounted everything she had overheard. Masood's plan to manipulate food prices, his boasts of becoming richer than the Sheikh himself. She explained how she had stolen the ledger, the risks she had taken to obtain it. She pointed to the entries, the detailed records of Masood's illicit dealings, the bribes he had accepted, the suffering he had caused. Ashraf listened intently, his expression hardening with each word. He opened the ledger, his eyes scanning the pages, the truth of Salma's words becoming undeniable. The neatly recorded figures, the coded transactions, the names of merchants and officials, it was all there, a damning indictment of Masood's treachery. Anger flared in Ashraf's eyes, hot and fierce. He had trusted Masood, had relied on him to oversee the market, to ensure the well-being of his people. And all the while, Masood had been betraying that trust, enriching himself at the expense of the vulnerable. He slammed his fist on the desk, the sound echoing through the chamber. "This is outrageous," he exclaimed, his voice shaking with rage. "He will pay for this. He will answer for the suffering he has caused." He looked at Salma, his anger softening into gratitude. "You have done a great service to this city, Salma," he said, his voice filled with respect. "You have risked your life to expose this corruption. I am in your debt." Salma, exhausted but relieved, simply nodded. She had done what she had set out to do. She had exposed Masood's treachery. She had given Ashraf the proof he needed to bring him to justice. Now it was up to him to act. Ashraf summoned a small group of his most trusted advisors, men whose loyalty and integrity were beyond question. He laid the ledger before them, explaining the gravity of Masood's crimes. The advisors, shocked and appalled by the extent of the corruption, pledged their unwavering support in bringing Masood to justice. They knew they had to act swiftly and decisively. Masood was a powerful man, with connections throughout the city. He had influence within the palace walls and amongst the merchants in the marketplace. A direct confrontation would be risky. He could deny everything, destroy evidence, or even worse, incite unrest amongst his supporters. They needed a foolproof plan, a way to expose him publicly, leaving him no room for denial or escape. They decided to hold a public hearing in the marketplace, the very place where Masood had wielded his power so cruelly. They would summon witnesses, merchants who had been forced to pay bribes, families who had suffered under Masood's inflated prices. They would present the ledger as undeniable proof of his crimes. Ashraf dispatched his most trusted guards to discreetly gather witnesses, assuring them of his protection. He knew many were afraid of Masood, fearful of retribution. But he also knew that many harbored resentment towards the market overseer, their silence born of fear, not complicity. He appealed to their sense of justice, their desire to see an end to Masood's tyranny. One by one, the witnesses came forward, their testimonies painting a vivid picture of Masood's corruption. A baker spoke of being forced to pay exorbitant fees for the privilege of selling his bread in the market. A fruit seller described how Masood had confiscated his goods, claiming they were spoiled, only to sell them himself at inflated prices. A mother, her voice trembling with emotion, recounted how she had been unable to afford food for her children, forced to watch them go hungry while Masood grew fat on his ill-gotten gains. The advisors meticulously documented each testimony, compiling a detailed record of Masood's crimes. They cross-referenced the witnesses' accounts with the entries in the ledger, building an ironclad case against him. They prepared questions for the public hearing, anticipating Masood's denials and evasions. They planned every detail, leaving nothing to chance. As the day of the hearing approached, a sense of anticipation filled the city. News of the impending confrontation had spread through the marketplace, whispered from stall to stall, passed from neighbor to neighbor. The people, long silenced by fear, began to feel a flicker of hope, a sense that justice might finally be served. Ashraf, despite the careful planning, felt a knot of anxiety in his stomach. He knew the risks. He knew Masood was a dangerous enemy, capable of anything. But he also knew that he couldn't back down. He had a duty to his people, a responsibility to uphold justice. He had to expose Masood's treachery, no matter the cost. He had to show his people that he was a just ruler, a ruler who would protect them from those who sought to exploit and oppress them. He knew that the future of Zerzura, the well-being of his people, rested on the success of this plan. The marketplace of Zerzura buzzed with a nervous energy. Merchants whispered amongst themselves, their eyes darting towards the raised platform erected in the center of the square. The platform was draped in rich fabrics, and two ornate chairs sat upon it, one occupied by Sheikh Ashraf, his face stern and resolute. The other chair remained empty, awaiting the arrival of Masood. A hush fell over the crowd as Masood appeared, flanked by two of his guards. He wore his usual finery, his robes immaculate, his demeanor arrogant. He climbed the steps to the platform, his eyes sweeping over the assembled crowd, a sneer playing on his lips. He sat down in the empty chair, facing Ashraf, his expression defiant. Ashraf rose, his voice clear and strong, echoing across the marketplace. "Masood," he began, "you are accused of grave crimes against the people of Zerzura. You are accused of extortion, of manipulating food prices, of enriching yourself at the expense of the vulnerable." Masood scoffed, his eyes flashing with anger. "These are lies," he declared, his voice booming across the square. "Fabrications designed to discredit me. I have served this city faithfully, protecting its markets, ensuring its prosperity." Ashraf held up the ledger, its leather cover worn and cracked. "This ledger tells a different story," he said, his voice unwavering. "It details your illicit dealings, the bribes you have accepted, the profits you have hoarded." Masood's eyes narrowed. "That ledger is a forgery," he insisted. "A fabrication created by my enemies." Ashraf turned to the crowd. "Let the witnesses speak," he commanded. One by one, the witnesses stepped forward, their voices trembling at first, then gaining strength as they recounted their experiences. The baker described how Masood had demanded a percentage of his earnings, threatening to shut down his stall if he refused. The fruit seller testified to Masood's confiscation of his goods, his subsequent sale of those same goods at inflated prices. The mother, her voice choked with emotion, spoke of her children's hunger, their suffering caused by Masood's greed. With each testimony, Masood's denials grew weaker, his face paling. He tried to interrupt, to discredit the witnesses, to claim they were lying. But Ashraf silenced him with a raised hand. "The evidence is clear," he stated, his voice ringing with authority. "The ledger, the testimonies, they all point to your guilt." Masood, cornered and desperate, made a last-ditch effort to save himself. He pointed at Salma, standing at the edge of the crowd, her face pale but resolute. "It's her," he shouted, his voice filled with venom. "She's the one behind this. She stole the ledger. She's a thief, a liar. Don't believe anything she says." Salma stepped forward, her eyes meeting Masood's without flinching. "I stole the ledger," she admitted, her voice clear and steady. "But I did it to expose your crimes, to protect the people of this city from your greed." Ashraf looked at Salma, his eyes filled with admiration. He turned back to Masood. "Your lies are exposed," he declared. "Your treachery is revealed. The people of Zerzura have heard the truth." He signaled to his guards. They stepped forward, seizing Masood, his struggles futile against their strong grip. A collective gasp rose from the crowd, followed by a wave of murmurs, then a roar of approval. Masood's reign of terror was over. Justice had been served. Masood, stripped of his finery and bound in chains, was led away from the marketplace. His head hung low in shame. The crowd, no longer cowed by his presence, erupted. In cheers, their voices a chorus of relief and triumph. Ashraf remained on the platform, his gaze sweeping over the faces of his people, his heart filled with a mixture of anger and resolve. He addressed the crowd, his voice resonating with newfound strength. "Justice has been served today," he declared. "Masood's reign of terror is over, but our work is not yet done. We must now begin the task of healing, of rebuilding, of ensuring that such injustice never happens again." He announced the immediate removal of Masood from his position and the appointment of a new market overseer, a man known for his honesty and fairness. He ordered a thorough investigation into the market operations, a detailed accounting of Masood's illicit dealings. He wanted to know the full extent of the damage, the true cost of Masood's greed. The investigation revealed a web of corruption that extended far beyond Masood himself. Several merchants, complicit in his schemes, were exposed and brought to justice. Records of inflated prices, of confiscated goods, of bribes and kickbacks were meticulously documented. The extent of the suffering caused by Masood's actions became painfully clear. Families had gone hungry, businesses had been ruined, lives had been shattered. Ashraf listened to the testimonies of those who had suffered, his heart heavy with the weight of their stories. He saw the pain in their eyes, the desperation in their voices. He knew he had a responsibility to not only punish the guilty, but also to repair the damage, to restore hope to his people. He vowed to implement sweeping reforms, to create a market that was fair and just, a market where everyone had the opportunity to thrive. He promised to establish regulations to control prices, to prevent hoarding and profiteering. He pledged to create a system of oversight to ensure transparency and accountability. He envisioned a marketplace where honesty and integrity prevailed, where the needs of the people were placed above the greed of a few. He knew the task ahead would be challenging. He knew there would be resistance from those who benefited from the old system, from those who clung to the shadows of corruption. But he was determined to succeed. He had seen the suffering of his people, and he would not rest until he had brought about real and lasting change. He knew that the future of Zerzura, the well-being of his people, depended on it. He had a duty to fulfill, a promise to keep. He would not fail them. Ashraf, driven by a newfound determination, set about transforming the marketplace of Zerzura. He knew that punishing Masood and his accomplices was only the first step. He had to address the root causes of the suffering, the hunger that had driven so many to desperation. He had to create a system that ensured everyone had access to food, regardless of their circumstances. He envisioned a system of communal kitchens, strategically located throughout the city, where nutritious meals would be prepared and distributed to those in need. He ordered the construction of these kitchens, using the confiscated wealth of Masood and his accomplices to fund the project. He consulted with experienced cooks, bakers, and farmers, seeking their advice on the most efficient and effective ways to produce and distribute food. He studied the layout of the city, identifying areas where hunger was most prevalent, ensuring that the kitchens were accessible to those who needed them most. He implemented strict regulations on food prices, preventing merchants from exploiting the vulnerable. He established a system of inspections, ensuring that food was fresh and wholesome, that no one was selling spoiled or contaminated goods. He created a council of merchants and community leaders, tasked with overseeing the market operations, ensuring transparency and accountability. He also recognized the importance of empowering people, of giving them the skills and resources they needed to provide for themselves. He established training programs for farmers, teaching them new techniques for increasing crop yields. He supported local artisans, providing them with access to markets and resources. He encouraged entrepreneurship, fostering a spirit of innovation and self-reliance. As the communal kitchens took shape, Ashraf realized he needed someone to oversee their operations, someone with a deep understanding of the market and the needs of its people. He thought of Salma, her resourcefulness, her compassion, her unwavering dedication to her siblings. He had witnessed her intelligence, her ability to navigate the complexities of the marketplace. He knew she possessed a unique perspective, a valuable insight into the lives of those who struggled to survive. He summoned Salma to his private chamber. She entered hesitantly, her eyes still bearing the shadows of her recent ordeal. Ashraf reassured her with a kind smile. "Salma," he said, "I have a proposition for you. I am establishing a system of communal kitchens to ensure that no one in Zazura goes hungry. I believe you possess the skills and the compassion to help me in this endeavor." He offered her an apprenticeship in the palace kitchens, an opportunity to learn from the most experienced chefs in the city. He explained that she would play a key role in the development and operation of the communal kitchens, her insights and experience invaluable in shaping this new system. Salma listened intently, her eyes widening with surprise and gratitude. She had never imagined such an opportunity, a chance to not only provide for her siblings, but also to help others who faced similar struggles. She accepted Ashraf's offer without hesitation, her heart filled with a newfound sense of purpose. She began her apprenticeship with enthusiasm, her quick wit and eagerness to learn impressing the palace chefs. She studied the culinary arts, mastering the techniques of preparing nutritious and flavorful meals. She shared her knowledge of the market, her understanding of the needs of the people, helping to shape the menus for the communal kitchens. As the communal kitchens opened their doors, the people of Zerzura flocked to them, their faces etched with gratitude. They received warm meals, prepared with care and compassion, a symbol of the Sheikh's commitment to their well-being. Hunger that had plagued the city began to recede, replaced by a sense of hope, a belief that a brighter future was possible. Salma, working tirelessly in the palace kitchens, found a sense of fulfillment she had never known before. She had escaped the shadows of the marketplace, the constant struggle for survival. She had found a place where her talents were valued, her compassion recognized. She had found a way to make a difference, to contribute to the well-being of her community. And in doing so, she had discovered a strength within herself, a resilience that had been forged in the fires of adversity. Years passed. The seasons turned, painting the gardens of Zerzura in a vibrant tapestry of colors. Salma, under Ashraf's patient guidance, blossomed. Her quick wit sharpened, her knowledge deepened, her innate compassion flourished. She excelled in the palace kitchens, her culinary skills rivaling those of the most experienced chefs. She became a trusted advisor to Ashraf, her insights into the needs of the people invaluable in shaping his policies. The communal kitchens thrived under her watchful eye, ensuring that no one in Zerzura went hungry. Ashraf watched Salma's transformation with growing admiration. He had seen her courage in the face of adversity, her resilience in the face of hardship. He had witnessed her compassion, her unwavering dedication to those in need. He valued her intelligence, her sharp observations, her ability to see the world with clear and unflinching eyes. The respect he had felt for the young street girl had deepened into something more profound, something he recognized as love. Salma, in turn, had come to see Ashraf not just as a ruler, but as a man of integrity and compassion. She admired his dedication to his people, his unwavering commitment to justice. She had witnessed his kindness, his gentle strength, his genuine concern for the well-being of his city. The gratitude she had felt for the man who had rescued her from Masood's wrath had blossomed into a deep and abiding love. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Ashraf invited Salma to join him in the palace gardens. They strolled among the fragrant blossoms, the air filled with the sweet scent of jasmine and the gentle murmur of the fountains. Ashraf stopped before a marble fountain, its waters shimmering in the twilight. He took Salma's hand, his gaze meeting hers. "Salma," he said, his voice soft but steady, "I have come to cherish your wisdom, your compassion, your strength. You have become the heart of this city, and you have captured mine." He knelt before her, presenting a ring set with a single perfect pearl. "Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears welled in Salma's eyes, tears of joy and gratitude. "Yes, Ashraf," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. 1,000 times yes. Their wedding was a joyous occasion, celebrated throughout Zerzura. The people rejoiced, their love for Salma and their respect for Ashraf uniting them in a shared celebration. The palace gardens were filled with music and laughter, the air fragrant with the scent of flowers and spices. Salma, radiant in a gown of ivory silk, and Ashraf, his eyes shining with happiness, stood before their people, their hands clasped together, their hearts united. As Sheikh Salma, she continued her work with the communal kitchens, ensuring that no child in Zerzura ever went hungry again. She became a respected member of the court, her wisdom and compassion influencing Ashraf's decisions, shaping the future of their city. She established schools and hospitals, ensuring that everyone had access to education and health care. She championed the rights of the poor and vulnerable, her voice a powerful advocate for justice and equality. Their love story became a legend, whispered from generation to generation, a testament to the power of compassion, the triumph of justice, and the enduring strength of love. It was a story of a young street girl who had risen from the ashes of hardship to become a beacon of hope for her people, a story of a ruler who had learned to see his city through the eyes of those he governed, and a story of a love that had blossomed in the most unexpected of places, a love that had transformed a city and inspired a nation.